All right, good evening, everyone. I'm going to get us started. Can you hear me in Concord?
Hello?
Yes, Kate, we can hear you.
Good. And I think we've done a visual count, and we believe that we have a quorum, so we can get going. But Darlene, if that is not right, or Dawn, let me know. Tom Budd is here. He's just getting snacks.
Yes, I saw him. My visual is a little off. The lady sitting next to Sloan.
We can't hear on that end. Can y'all get a mic on down there?
It's Elizabeth.
Oh, from San Pablo. From San. Thank you. Thank you.
I think we're good. So do you want to just do a roll call and make sure we're good, Darlene?
Yes, we can do that.
Okay, Doc.
City of Belvedere.
Here.
City of Benicia. Here. City of Concord. Contra Costa County.
Here.
Town of Corte Madera.
Here.
Town of Danville. City of El Cerrito. Town of Fairfax.
Here.
City of Lafayette. City of Larkspur.
I'm here.
County of Marin.
Here.
City of Martinez. Town of Moraga.
Here.
County of Napa and all 5 Napa cities. City of Novato. City of Oakley. City of Pinole. City of Pittsburgh. City of Richmond. Town of Ross. Town of San Anselmo.
Here.
City of San Pablo. City of San Rafael.
Here.
City of San Ramon.
Here.
City of Sausalito and City of Mill Valley. County of Solano. Town of Tiburon.
Here.
City of Walnut Creek. We have a quorum.
Great. Thanks very much, Darlene. And Dawn,
You're welcome.
Dawn, did you want to make a statement about the agenda before we move on?
Did. Thank you so much for asking. I just wanted to clarify, in case there's any doubt about the order of things on the agenda, that after the closed session is adjourned, the meeting will reconvene in open session, beginning with agenda item number 4. So just wanted to clarify that because the agenda could be a little bit confusing on that point. Thanks.
All righty, thank you. So now is time for public open time for items not on our agenda. Do we have members of the public? Sam, hello, come on up. Hopefully that microphone is on.
Hi, Dawn. Long time no see. I just wanted to, guys, give you a little safety update.
Would you state your name for folks who don't know you?
I'm Sparrow.
Thank
I
you.
live just up the road 1.5 miles north of here. And I just wanted to let you guys know of the safety of the high voltage lines. They finally trimmed the branches off the high voltage wires just up the street. I complained about it 2 years ago to PG&E, and they just got around to trimming them. And I met the inspectors who came around and looked at the trees, and they said, yeah, we got a problem here. It's really bad in Sonoma. This was a year ago. And I talked to the tree trimmers, and they have such a hard time to get paid, the guys who climb the trees and do the work. And I'm going, what's going on with this system here that it takes so long to get? Have you ever seen a tree fall on a high voltage line? It explodes. It doesn't just ignite, it explodes. And as an electrician, I worked with some of the PG&E guys who got fired from PG&E. Their job was to make their system more safe from trees in Santa Rosa. He got fired from PG&E because he was costing them too much money. And still, I drive around Marin and I'm going, oh my God, especially up towards Fairfax and Woodacre, going, we really got to have more attention to the trees, particularly dead trees leaning towards the high voltage lines. And some, as an electrician, they can make them so that they're safe by insulated and fast blowing fuses. The system that they have now is not safe because it will reset 3 times. You see the lights blink 1, 2, and if the tree doesn't clear or the branch doesn't clear after the 3rd one, then it will trip. Well, this is no longer acceptable with the dry trees that we have. And they do have other wiring methods that are more safe. As professionally speaking as an electrician, and you know, we're next. So just letting you know, we have to do something.
Thank you, Sam. Good to see you. Do we have, we have really quick? All right. Do we have any other members of the public, either here or in Concord, who would like to speak on items not on our agenda? All right. So I'm not.
None in Concord.
Okie dokie. Very good. Thank you, everyone. We now are going to go into closed session. And so I'm going to need to ask folks who are not on the board, any member of the staff or member of the public, to leave the room.
City of El Cerrito,
Here.
Town of Fairfax,
Here.
City of Lafayette, City of Larkspur,
Here.
County of Marin,
Here.
City of Martinez, Town of Moraga,
Here.
County of Napa and all Napa cities, City of Novato, City of Oakley,
Here.
City of Pinole,
Here.
City of Pittsburgh, City of Richmond. Oh, I'm so sorry. All right, City of Richmond.
Here. Here. Here.
Thank you. Town of Ross,
Here.
Town of San Anselmo,
Here.
City of San Pablo, City of San Rafael,
Here.
City of San Ramon,
Here.
City of Sausalito and Mill Valley, County of Solano, Town of Tiburon,
He's here. Here.
City of Walnut Creek. Excellent.
Contra Costa's back after getting some coffee.
Great. We got you, Director Joya. Thank you so much. Roll call is complete.
All right, very good. Thank you, John. So we are back in open session. The board was in closed session and gave direction to council, and we have nothing else to report out. Board announcements from anyone? Hearing and seeing none. We did do public open time for items not on our agenda previously, but I'm going to give another opportunity for members of the public to speak on items not on our agenda if they didn't have a chance to do so previously. If there's anyone who would like to speak. Yep, come on up to the microphone. And tell us your name, although some of us know you.
I'm Lori Grace, and I created the first loan to Marin Clean Energy to get going,
Yeah.
and got awarded, so I'm really happy. And I feel like Marin Clean Energy is kind of like a baby to me. You know, I love it, and I love that it's expanded to MCE. And I'm concerned about the PCIA issues, and I want to help in terms of any kind of lobbying, fundraising, anything, you know, because I so love what you all have created. Just moves me. So, you know, Catherine knows me, and and maybe a few others. Dawn certainly knows me. But I just wanted to say I want to be helpful, and I certainly, I was wealthy, I was an activist, and I care, okay? So that's all I can say at this time. And I'm fresh back from living in Hawaii for 2 years, so.
Super.
Thanks.
Great. Good to see
At
you.
my eco-retreat center.
Yeah, glad you're back, Lori. Good to see you, and we
Thank
will be
you.
eternally grateful to that loan that you gave us when we were first
Yeah.
getting off the ground.
And I'd like to help
Godmother.
now, too,
I
somehow.
appreciate that.
Okay.
Super.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else from the public who would like to comment on items not on the agenda? Okay. I'm seeing no one, so we're going to move forward on to a report from the Chief Executive Officer.
Great. I will keep this short since we have a long agenda. And hello to Lori. It's really great to see you again. Welcome back. Because we have such a long agenda tonight, we are feeding you. So please feel free to jump up and get food throughout the meeting to keep us all going. At your station at the dais, we have a county report, which I just wanted to highlight for you. This is our fall 2019 edition, the very first edition. So keep it. It could be, an important document in the future for our archives. It's a county by county highlight, and this is a document that we expect to publish from time to time that just shows some of the highlights that are happening related to MCE in each of the counties that we serve. So take a look, feel free to share this, and it has also gone to all of you electronically and is available on the website. So feel free to share far and wide. Next, I wanted to let folks know that our net energy metering incentives are being revisited at our upcoming technical committee meeting. This meeting will be held on December 5th, and even if you're not on the technical committee, you're welcome to come and participate in the discussion. But we're looking at some possible adjustments to how we handle our net energy metering tariff, particularly in light of some of the incentives that we're trying to incorporate related to battery storage and helping with PSPS events. So if you're interested in that discussion, feel free to join us. The meeting will be held, as usual, San Rafael and Concord. It's at 8:30 a.m. meeting, but we do have coffee. So come along if you're interested. Next item is, I just wanted to let folks know, so you can be thinking about it. We have an item on the agenda a little bit later to open up the committees that we have for MCE for new members. And we have a couple of folks that have already volunteered to join a committee. One that wasn't highlighted in your packet is the Ad Hoc Contracts Committee for 2020. We haven't had that ad hoc for a couple of years, but we will be forming it in 2020. So I just wanted to get that in the back of your minds. If you're interested in MCE contracts, this could be a committee for you. So once we get to that agenda item, we'll be looking for volunteers. Next item is just wanted to let folks know that regulatory activity that MCE is involved in and legislative updates are included in your packet as item 17, but we will not have a staff presentation on that item. It was just for informational purposes, and that should help us keep the agenda a little bit shorter. But if you all have questions about anything in that packet, feel free to reach out to me or Shalini offline, and we're happy to engage with you on that. There's a lot going on. So I'm not going to attempt to delve into that today. And then the very last thing is just wanted to remind folks that we have the MCE holiday party coming up. It's a little earlier this year than usual, so might sneak up on you. It's going to be on December 6th at 6 p.m. in Napa, same venue as last year. It should be a lot of fun, and we encourage folks to come, bring a significant other friend or family member if you'd like, and we hope that everyone can make it.
Yeah, just a comment. This is Elizabeth in Concord. And so on your way to Napa, you can stop off in Benicia where we have our Christmas tree lighting. There are usually about 10 to 13,000 people. So we welcome everyone.
Super. Thank you. All right. Any comments or questions on the CEO's report? All right. Seeing none, I'm going to move on to an item 8 on our agenda, which is our consent calendar. We have 3 items. Is there anything that any board member would want to discuss or comment on or correct? If not,
Number 3.
number 3 on the approved contracts update. All
Yeah.
right, Ford, do you have a question or comment?
I just, when I was reviewing these, I mean, there's some breathtaking numbers. when numbers for 29 million, 62 million, 25 million, 33, and so on. And when we authorized the approval of contracts that would be executed in less than a year, I mean, it certainly wasn't in my mind that the financial scope would be like that. And so I'm not really sure what the appropriate thing to do is, but I did not feel comfortable on a consent calendar simply approving those kinds of expenditures and sales.
I'm going to,
And I'm happy to speak to that item of
Consent calendar.
Yeah, I think we have essentially pulled it now, and Greg also has a comment, and then we'll come back to you, Don.
yeah, my comment, again, I was like Ford, I was looking at this and there's no unique identifier on any of these transactions for me to say, hey, I want to explore transaction number 15 or transaction number whatever. So it seemed unable for us to potentially dig in and ask about specific transactions with the lack of information that was provided. And so it seemed like a greater number than normal with no explanation. So those are my two comments on.
Okay. Yeah, Barbara, did you have a comment as well? Dawn, I'm going to let you respond to all the comments once we have them.
Just one quick thing. This is Barbara Kohler in Fairfax. Similar to what Greg said, I was a little concerned in the past when we saw these contracts, we saw who they were for. And now it's just under a generic supply of resource adequacy. And I think it would be helpful if we saw who the contracts were to. And I think that would make us better informed.
Right.
Thank you.
Any other comments from board members on this item? Okay, Dawn, do you want to address the comment?
Yeah, very happy to. And these are excellent questions. I'm glad we're getting asked about some of the items on this contract update. The first thing I'll respond to is just the long list of items that we're seeing, and part of this is because we have not had a board meeting since June where we had a contracts update. So we did have a board retreat in September, but we don't take standard consent calendar items to the board retreat so that we can focus on more substantive items. So what you're seeing here is an accumulation of a lot of contracting for many months. The other thing that you're seeing is a lot of contracting for resource adequacy in particular, and there are new regulations at the CPUC that require all load-serving entities to now go out 3 years into the future in procurement of resource adequacy. And the deadline for our compliance filing for resource adequacy was October 31st. So you'll notice a lot of resource adequacy sales and purchases leading up to that. This summer and this fall, we're extremely busy with a lot of resource adequacy procurement. There are also some new regulations around resource adequacy that are requiring that we purchase small chunks of resource adequacy in 7 different local areas, and that has required some over procurement in order to get the chunks that we need, and then we are needing to sell off our long position after we've met our compliance obligations. So that's why you're seeing more than usual, you're seeing sales of resource adequacy. So there's a long list here, and that's a little bit of why you're seeing a long list. The second thing I want to respond to is the format of this. And we're very open to input on this, but the reason that the format changed is that previously, in our contracts report, we were listing counterparty names. We were also listing term lengths. And so it made it very easy for anyone in the market to do a math calculation and find out exactly what we're paying per megawatt or per megawatt hour. It also made it very easy for other counterparties looking for resource adequacy. There's been an extremely tight market. made it easy for them to come up with new names of counterparties that they might not have thought of before. So in light of the tightening of the market and concerns around protecting market-sensitive information, we did change the format of this. I think that we can certainly add numbers to this list. I think that's a great suggestion, so that if folks want to ask about, okay, what's item number 8 on the list, can we get more information about that, we'd be able to dig that up. We certainly have additional information that we can provide, but it's the market-sensitive information that we're trying to be careful about to protect MCE's interests, so that we are not giving up any competitive advantage that we have. So I hope that helps, but I'm very open to input on how we might improve this format going forward.
And Ford has a comment.
I understand the concern. What my concern was is that given the amounts and given my responsibility to exercise some sort of supervisorial oversight, there's just no way to do that. And given the huge numbers, it was very concerning to me.
Yeah, and thank you for saying that. I should have clarified that this is not a request for approval. This is a list of items that have already been approved under existing authorities that have been delegated to either staff or staff in consultation with the board chair. And so for resource adequacy contracts that are 1 year or less, or actually any supply contracts that are 1 year or less, we follow the directives in our procurement resolution that dictate which contracts should be approved without going to the technical committee or the board. And so those are the ones that you are seeing here. Anything that falls outside of that authority would be coming to the board with a lot of detail, or to the technical committee with a lot of detail for approval. So what you're seeing here are short-term contracts that fit within the existing authority.
Greg.
Yeah, I don't know what page or what line item to give it to you on, but it's August 2019. And it says over 5 years, 33 million. Can you help me understand that within the testimony you just gave?
I'm looking for that one. Okay. Yes. So that one is a resource adequacy contract. And so resource adequacy contracts do not need to go to the board or the technical committee for approval. And this was a contract for a 3-year chunk of resource adequacy that was required by the CPUC by that October 31st deadline. And I'm happy to follow up with more information if you'd like offline.
Thank you.
Sorry, I should also clarify that all of these purchases have been made within the existing board-approved budget, in case that's not obvious.
Okay. Some follow-up offline conversation might be appropriate, Greg. Yeah. Other comments or questions? Sorry, Sloan.
Yeah. Scott, this is Scott Perkins. I'll move consent calendar C1, 2, and 3.
Thank you, Scott. We got one comment by Sloan.
Sorry, I just wanted to.
Second.
Okay, hold on.
It's okay. I'm not going to oppose the motion here, but I wonder, Dawn, could you just remind me? I remember we passed some sort of resolution within the last couple of years delegating authority for staff to make decisions based on time and dollar figures, but the concern that I felt, and I'm now hearing some of my brothers and sisters on the board here feel the same way. There's some threshold when you get into the $1 million contracts and then the 8-figure plus contracts extending over, several years. Was it or can you remind me, is that within the authority that we delegated to not require any sort of board approval, or how does that, I'm not trying to load the question, although the way that came out, I don't remember having said it's that level of decision-making would not require some sort of participation when you're talking a $30 or $60 million contract. That's all.
Yeah, no, it's a fair question, and I think that the new requirements by the excuse me, by the CPUC on the resource adequacy front have resulted in increasing dollar figures for resource adequacy. We used to be paying much smaller amounts, and we used to be buying RA in 1-year increments instead of 3-year increments. So there has been a change there. But since there's a few questions on this might be something that we want to revisit in the executive committee or the technical committee, and just take a look at what the delegated authority is currently and see if we want to make any adjustments. We certainly could do that.
Yep, I think that'd be a great idea.
But Dawn, is it your understanding that you currently enjoy the authority to execute a 5-year, $60 million contract?
On resource adequacy.
Yeah. That's not rhetorical. I'm just curious. Is that the current authority?
For resource adequacy, yeah.
Chair.
Thank you.
Yep, Greg.
Yeah, Greg Lyman, El Cerrito. On that same page that I had asked before, and this, I thought this was what you were asking about, Sloan. There is a purchase of System Energy in September of 2019, $62 million, and it says 1-5 years. And so I thought this was specifically what you were asking about, Sloan. 5 years is what that would lead us to believe that. And so there's 2 purchases there in a row. That's $90 million worth of acquisitions, and they both say 1 to 5 years. So I just want to make sure that that's consistent with the current policy. And it would be great to put this on the TechCom.
Yeah. So these were both discussed in TechCom, and they are under the authority of the board chair and the CEO after being discussed in TechCom. So both of these were discussed in TechCom, and we can reference the minutes if that would be helpful. But that's the requirement for any system energy. Anything that's not resource adequacy needs to follow that protocol if it is under 5 years.
Yeah. And I think it would be good. I mean, because resource adequacy has been such a moving field in the last 6 months, I think, and we have talked about it some, but I think that would be great to put that on the agenda for TechCom, just to have a little bit of further discussion on that issue. Anything else on the consent calendar items? I had a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All right. Thanks very much, everybody.
Wait,
Okay. Yes.
who made the second?
I don't remember.
We've got it here. It's Director Higgins.
All right. So now we're moving on to item 9 on our agenda, which is our applicant analysis. And we're doing cities of Vallejo and Pleasant Hill, which we had visited a little bit in our last meeting, I think. And so who is going to introduce this topic?
We are going to hear from Jenna Familar, who's on our team and has done a lot of the heavy lifting on this effort. And we also have Sam Kang from PEA, who's going to be jumping in as well. But Jenna's going to start us off.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you, Dawn and Director Sears. So I'll just give a brief introduction. Most of this information is actually I think all of this information essentially is in your staff report. But in January of this year, we opened a new community inclusion period for the 6 jurisdictions in Contra Costa and the 6 jurisdictions in Solano County that are not currently served by a community choice provider. So I'll remind everyone that we currently serve all of the communities in Napa, all of the communities in Marin, and 14 of the 20 jurisdictions in Contra Costa County, as well as Benicia in Solano County. And then next year, in April 2020, we will be enrolling unincorporated Solano County. So we offered the communities in those existing 4 counties who do not have a choice of provider the opportunity to engage with MCE and explore their options for community choice. During that time period, the communities of Vallejo in Solano County and Pleasant Hill in Contra Costa County were able to submit the membership request documentation, and we have moved forward with completing an applicant analysis, looking at the cost, impact, and greenhouse gas impact to MCE should we choose to include these communities. So we will go through a brief presentation. I'll start off and then I'll hand it over to Sam. So the purpose of we'll move on to the next slide. The purpose of the analysis is to evaluate the applications submitted by these two jurisdictions, Pleasant Hill and Vallejo. And if the analysis showed that the result would be a neutral or positive fiscal impact for MCE and our existing customers, as well as accelerating greenhouse gas reductions and increasing the amount of renewable energy being used in California, we would allow this to move forward. So a brief summary of the two jurisdictions, and we'll get into more account information shortly. But the city of Pleasant Hill, again, is located in Contra Costa County. They voted to request MCE membership on June 3rd, and they would be the 15th Contra Costa jurisdiction to join MCE with a population of approximately 35,000 people. The city of Vallejo is located in Solano County, and they voted to request MCE membership on May 28th of this year and would be the third Solano County jurisdiction to join MCE with a population of approximately 122,000. So the timeline for these communities on the next slide would be if our board moves tonight to include the new communities, we would submit an updated implementation plan to the CPUC, and we anticipate that similar to how things, the timeline went last time, they would certify the implementation plan in February of 2020, allowing us to enroll those communities and begin service starting in 2021, that sometime in that calendar year. When that would actually take place would depend on a variety of different factors. So with that, I will hand it over to Sam to go through the more specific details.
Great, thank you, Jenna. So basically, to level set and to refresh everybody's memory in terms of where MCE currently is right now, you have a customer base of about 483,500 accounts, energy sales about 5.3 gigawatt hours, peak demand of about 901 megawatts, and your renewable energy content is over 60%, which is quite large, and carbon-free is even bigger with 90 to 100%. Annual revenues are about $440 million. That's where it is today. Next slide, please. And by adding these new communities, you would basically, I'm just going down to the bottom total line there, you're looking at adding about 64,000 new accounts, adding about 509,000 megawatt hours, which is about actually 10% of your current load, which is a decent amount. And your average your peak demand is going to be about 92 megawatts. Next slide, please. The breakdown of your customer base, it's primarily residential. And on the next biggest area is the other non-res, and which is basically your large commercial and some industrial customers. Next slide, please. Some of your key assumptions that we actually use for this analysis. We're looking at starting service in April 2021. We're looking at 90% customer participation rate, so which means we're looking at about a 10% opt-out rate. Incremental revenues, we're basing that off of MCE's current rates, which may change in the future. The incremental cost analysis, so that on the cost side, it accounts for additional power supply, customer billing, call center support, and PG&E service fees. Any amounts left over for the revenue surplus would be a fiscal benefit or surplus. Next slide, please. So this is the revenue and cost breakdown, and the net benefit or the fiscal benefit for 2021 to 2022 is about $8.5 million, and 2022 to 23 is about $6.5 million. Next slide. So we looked at some sensitivities, so in terms of what could swing the fiscal impact, and so based upon your base projection, like I said, it's about $8.5 million. If the power costs were to actually increase by 20%, we're looking at, you would have fiscal revenue of $4.9 million, And if the opt-out rate were, say, 25% rather than the 10%, we're looking at about a $7 million bottom line. Next slide, please. Under renewable energy side, so in the first full year, because as everybody knows, the 2021 will be a partial year because it's starting in April. But for the first full year, we anticipate about 288,000 megawatt hours of new renewable energy, which would be great for MCE. And we would increase the sales in new communities by about 110,000 megawatt hours per year. Next slide, please. On greenhouse gases as well. So MC would buy between 233,000 to 284,000 additional carbon-free megawatt hours to serve these new communities. And this is estimated to reduce emissions by 100 to 122 metric tons of CO2 per year. Next slide. So just to summarize everything, we're looking at the fiscal benefit that could range, say, between 4.9 to 8.5 million per year, based upon current rates. We would, MCE would supply up to 110,666 megawatt hours a year of increased renewable energy, and you look at reducing your annual GHG emissions by about 122 metric tons. Any questions?
Thank you, John and Jen. Any questions from the board? None, hearing none.
So I
approve the recommendations of the staff. Do you want me to read them?
Any comments? No, not quite yet. I'm going to ask if there's anyone from the public who wants to comment first. Seeing none. All right. And sorry, did you need to make a comment?
Yeah, just a quick comment. This is Barbara Kohler in Fairfax. I noticed in the packet, on page 116 of the packet, I don't know where it is in yours, policy number 007 refers to 50% renewable energy, and I think we're at 60. And so it's not critical, but it maybe in the future we want to update our policy.
Thank you for catching that, Director Kohler. You have an eagle eye. You're absolutely right.
absolutely right.
Great. All right, super. Back to you, Elizabeth.
So move to accept the staff recommendations.
Second the motion, Kevin Harrell from Larkspur.
All right. We have a motion, a second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposition or abstentions? All right. Terrific. Thank you, everyone. Next on our agenda is item 10, which is our fiscal year 1920 operating fund budget amendment. Garth, I think we're looking to you.
Yes, thank you. So, the next four items will be finance related.
It's all you.
It's
okay.
all, yeah. Well, it will be me and some other elements and people from the finance staff. So,
super.
The first item up for your consideration is a budget amendment, and it's for the operating fund. And in March of this year, now it's going to be difficult to see, but I trust I'm going to blow that up for you and get it to hopefully to a size you can see it. So, but the board authorized staff and passed a budget in March that sets forth the limits for each budget line item that staff can spend and to collect revenue. So if you'll recall, the original budget that was passed in March projected a addition to our net position of about $14 million. So now in May of this year, the board approved a rate increase to better align revenues with cost recovery in each rate class, and basically to put MC in a position to meet its reserve requirement by the end of this fiscal year in March of 2020. So staff is not requesting any changes to the operating fund budget because we're basically on budget insofar as expenditures for our operating costs such as personnel and occupancy and so on. But we do want to talk about and propose an amendment to reflect the rate increase, additional revenues, and some additional costs we're seeing reflected in energy. Okay, let's see here. So hopefully you can see this a little bit better. So we've blown up the lines that we'd like to talk about now, and the first is energy revenue. So energy revenue is projected to be $61 million higher than the original budget, reflecting primarily the rate increase, but also slightly higher energy sales than we had projected at the beginning of the budget period. Additionally, cost of energy. We expect and projecting currently that cost of energy will be up about $16 million. But the difference between these additional revenues and these additional costs will projected to add about $45 million to our net position. So with the combination of the original $14 million, we do expect to be able to get somewhere around $59 to $60 million to our net position this year, which will allow us to hit our reserve fund target. Okay, so again, so that's just taking another look again, 45 million additional revenue to about 57 total for net revenue. I wanted to point out here that this addition of about $59 million or so, given the $91 million we had at the close of last fiscal year, would put us at about $151 million. Again, this is a number you'll see again a little bit later in the next agenda item, or two later, because this puts us at a place where we do anticipate hitting our reserve targets. And again, we'll also hit our liquidity targets as well. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Maida Strauss to talk about another addition we'd like to add as a part of this budget amendment, which is the addition of a resiliency fund.
So, staff is proposing the creation of this new resilience fund, and the initial funding for it would be $3 million. So the creation of this fund is in large part in response to the PG&E Public Safety Power Shutoff, the PSPS event, which the most recent one is just ending in parts of Napa County now. So these events are significantly impacting the safety, reliability, and health and welfare of the people of California, severely affecting vulnerable customers and critical community facilities. So with this fund, we want to empower our most vulnerable customers with advanced technology during power outage while being GHG-free and using green and clean energy. At the residential level, this would include low-income, disadvantaged customers and customers with medical issues. And on the non-residential side, we would focus on critical facilities that provide services to the community during power outages, such as first responders, hospitals, cooling stations, emergency evacuation centers, communities, and community centers. So the resilience projects that we are proposing, they would promote through reduced energy rates, discounts, facilitation, education, and technical assistance, the installation of storage devices across a large percentage of our distribution level customers. We want to significantly reduce, if not eliminate, the use of diesel generators. The storage devices, especially if we can co-locate them with rooftop solar, will, as much as possible, provide our most vulnerable customers with safety and security. Outside of power outage events, we will also use those resources to perform virtual aggregation and optimize MCE load servicing capability. We also foresee investing in forming microgrids that could provide total independence from the grid. Given the proposed scope of this effort, it's likely that $3 million is just the beginning of the funding needed to perform all of these projects, but we propose that that's the start, and if we have to start somewhere, we can start there. And we would come back to the board as needed with updates on all of our programs, the progress, and additional funding as needed.
I think the creation of this resiliency fund is fantastic, and I know it's getting late, and we don't want to spend a lot of time on any one thing, but I think this is really tremendous. The numbers that we're hitting are really important as well. But I think the creation of this fund, I think we will want to put more money into it ultimately. But what it says about MCE and the nimbleness of coming up with a program to respond to what we identified as weaknesses and shortcomings during the PSPS event is just tremendous. I mean, this is really a way for all of us to have a significant contribution, I think, throughout our service area. So thank you so much. I think this is great.
Thank you.
Battery storage and small scale microgrids, what's not to like for disadvantaged folks? Yeah. Anyway, did you want to say something else, Garth?
Did just want to sum up. So the fiscal impact of this proposed budget amendment is a $45 million increase in the budgeted and projected addition to net position for a total of $59,572,000. The increase is projected to allow MCE to meet its reserve target at the end of the fiscal year at the end of March 2020. And budgeted operating expenses include this contingency, and the staff expects the actual contribution to the net position will likely exceed the amended projected amount. So the recommendation, and on November 1, the Executive Committee unanimously supported this proposed budget amendment, and staff recommends that the board approve the proposed fiscal 2019-20 operating fund budget amendment to include the creation and initial funding of a resiliency fund in the amount of $3 million.
Super. Thank you. Thanks. Yeah, great. Any questions or comments from the board? Any comments from the public? All right, Kevin, I think you're on.
I'd like to approve the proposed amendment along with the resiliency fund.
Do I have a second?
Yes, second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposition?
Could we get?
Is that a comment?
Yes. Could we get a name of the person who has seconded the motion, please?
Ford Green, San Anselmo.
Great. Thank you so much.
Super. Thank you. All right, Garth, we're moving on to the next one, which is a resolution establishing an operating reserve fund.
Yes, thank you. So in the last 5 years, MCE has grown considerably in terms of load, customer serves, and sophistication. MCE was the first CCA to receive a credit rating, and now we're the first to receive 2 credit ratings. MCE's goal to reach, it's providing 85% renewable and 100% GHG-free energy in 10 years on a cost-competitive basis. We'll have to utilize all the available tools, including potentially directly owning generation or storage assets. Investment in generation and storage assets, once identified, would likely be achieved through a combination of using some of this MCE equity that we're talking about, but also through accessing the capital markets through the issuance of tax-exempt debt. So it's this potential, the need to potentially issue debt or aggressively use our bank credit lines, that is the basis for this next staff recommendation. So staff proposes the creation of an operating reserve fund to allow MCE to defer revenues in years when financial results are strong, to be used in future years when financial results are not as strong or are stressed. Deferring revenue to be used in future years will allow MCE to avoid sudden rate increases, to address unanticipated spikes in energy costs, or conversely to offset increase in the PCIA. Using deferred revenue in a future year would allow MCE to minimize the near-term impact on rates and net revenues while remaining in compliance with debt and counterparty financial covenants. So the type of fund that's being recommended here would be created under Government Accounting Standing Board's Standard 62. And this type of fund is very specific in that revenues are deferred in the year in which they're earned. When it's determined you have excess revenues or revenues that aren't necessarily needed in that year. And then from an accounting standpoint, the deferral of the current revenue into this fund would result in a reduction in your revenues that year. But effectively, you're banking revenues that you can then use in a future year to help you meet a covenant. Okay? So I'd like to take credit for creating this idea. But in fact, these funds are very common and used by municipal utilities, electric utilities, and water utilities around the country. So, and particularly those that have debt outstanding, because again, you have a tough year, you're able to draw on these funds, and they're counted as revenues to count against your covenants. So, and again, if we were to issue debt, MCE would have to have a certain, and we are actually going to talk a little bit later about certain covenants that are related to our line of credit. But these covenants would include a rate covenant that says we have to set our rates at certain levels, and or also a debt service coverage ratio. So it would require that we set our rates, regardless of what our expenses might be, such that we produce enough coverage of our debt service, say, by 1.5 times. And again, if we've got money in this operating reserve fund, we could use that money to meet this covenant if we had to. Okay. So importantly, from a governance standpoint, the creation of the operating reserve would require a resolution by the MCE Board of Directors. In addition, any deferral of money into the fund or taking money out of the fund would also require board action. Okay, so tonight, we're only asking that the board create an operating reserve fund. If and when we would like to defer revenue into the fund, we'd come back to the board for approval.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, so we're going to give you credit for bringing this idea to MCE, if not from developing it from scratch, okay?
We'll take it.
Okay, good. All right. Any comments or questions from the board? Tom, did you have something?
Before I award you credit, give me a brief explanation why this is any different or advantageous over simply having reserves.
Okay, that's a very, very good question. It really comes down to the accounting treatment, Director Budd. So, as I said, so if you defer revenue into one of these funds, it has to be a board created fund and board approved. Let's say we take $5 million and put it into the fund. That year, we do not recognize that $5 million as revenue. And so it would produce a reduction in our net position if we had a net position that year. And so we don't actually realize from an accounting standpoint that revenue in the year in which we earn it. Okay. If that was a normal reserve that just was created after all our expenses, okay, and we tried to utilize that to meet a covenant later, the bond documents wouldn't allow us to do that, nor would the attorneys. So, and nor would our accountant. So, by doing it beforehand and effectively banking that revenue, we can use it in a future year and actually count it against that covenant or that requirement. So that's the difference. A reserve is something that you recognize in that fiscal year. It just is sort of cash that you have left over. This, we're not recognizing it in that fiscal year, so we can save it for a future year.
So we don't have any bonded indebtedness, so at this point it doesn't make any difference, right? It's just looking at the potential in the future.
That's exactly correct. This is an anticipation of potentially having debt. We do have covenants to meet with regards to our banking arrangements, but we don't currently have debt, in the traditional sense.
Right. And tonight we're simply creating a document that would allow us to use this procedure in the future if we chose to. Correct?
That's right. There's a resolution that you can act on that creates the fund.
Great.
And the parameters around how that fund would operate and how we would put money in it or take money out of it.
Right. Dawn, had you wanted to or Elizabeth, sorry.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Elizabeth in Concord. Just as a clarification, so if I think I understand this, it's a good idea, but I think that hypothetically, if you do this, that means that if you have a requirement of 100% reserve, that you don't count the money that you put in the operating fund, that you're calculating your reserve based on after you put this set aside in the operating fund pursuant to GASB 62.
You understand the question?
No.
So with this, so I think what you're saying, Elizabeth, correct me if I'm wrong, is that we have an expectation of a certain reserve percentage. And so this money, if we did put it into the operating fund, would not be counted towards our reserve, the amount in our reserve.
It's a calculation issue. Yeah, it's a calculation issue. So if you have, by resolution, you say that you have to have 100% reserve, then, and you do this GASB 62 prior to that, it reduces the amount that you actually have because your 100% is 100% minus the operating reserve.
Okay, yes, that is correct. We would not be able to, as far as I understand, we would not be able to utilize it to calculate, or an addition to our net position that year. So that is correct. However, I do believe we're allowed to utilize it for liquidity purposes. So again, it is cash that we have. There are two, we're going to talk about our reserve policy just a minute here. And there are two aspects to that. One is, as you state, it's our net position or our reserve, and the other is our liquidity. My understanding is that you're correct, that if we put $5 million in this operating reserve, it could not be counted toward our net position in that year. And so it in total would reduce our net position by $5 million.
And I support this. I just wanted that clarification because I find it intriguing, and I've actually already asked my city manager about that.
Kevin?
No, I think I understand that, and I guess you're not asking us to make any decisions about numbers tonight in terms
That's
of this.
Correct.
But what we are saying is, based on what decisions we make in terms of our reserve policy, that will impose constraints on the future about what decisions we might make in terms of this opportunity, which is fine.
Correct.
Yeah, so
Right.
that's fine. So
Yeah.
as long as we understand, it's good.
Barbara?
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. This is Barbara Kohler Fairfax. I just have one question about the resolution. And under item B on the resolution 2019-06, it says the Board of Directors hereby authorizes the Director of Finance, the Treasurer, and their respective designees to deposit from time to time into this fund, provided that the board approves it at the next meeting. I think we've talked about this sort of thing in the past, and I know now Vicken is now the treasurer. In the past, it was a board member. My question would be, would it be better to leave it at the Director of Finance, the treasurer, and potentially add the CEO rather than designees? Because if a designee didn't have the level of expertise of either of you, put some money and then the board reversed it, I'm not sure that that's the best way to do it. It just seems to me it would be better to leave it at a higher level so we'd have more assurance that people were more in sync with what the board might want. Now, we, of course, could always reverse it, but I love the idea. I think it's great.
Okay. Yeah, I don't see any reason why we could not delete the notion of a designee as opposed to simply the Director of Finance and the Treasurer, or add the CEO to that, to the level of seniority that would be necessary to make a deposit. And again, as you say,
Okay, thank you.
and the reason we would want to do it that way, and because again, since we oftentimes now are having board meetings every 3 months, we would need to do this before the end of the fiscal year. So as a consequence, we may determine, if we're not having a board meeting, for example, in March, staff will realize, oh my gosh, we really should put some money away right now. We would put it away. We'd put, say, for example, $5 million in, and then that would not actually be a deposit to the operating reserve fund until the board approved it at the next board meeting.
Yeah, and it makes perfect sense to me. I understand the need to be
Right.
nimble and all that. I just think it might be better to leave it at a higher level and add the CEO as another person.
Okay.
Sorry. Any other questions or comments from the board? Any comments from the public? All right. Would anyone like to make a motion?
This is Scott. I'll make a motion to adopt Resolution 2019-06 as amended.
Great. Thank you, Scott.
Second, Barbara Kohler.
All in favor? Aye.
And Director Sears, because this is a resolution, we'll need to do a roll call vote.
Oh, damn.
Again, yes, I'm sorry. City of Belvedere,
Yes.
City of Benicia,
Yes.
City of Concord, Contra Costa County. Did John leave? Contra Costa County. John?
Yes.
Town of Corte Madera,
Yes.
Town of Danville, City of El Cerrito,
Yes.
Town of Fairfax,
Yes.
City of Lafayette,
Yes.
City of Larkspur,
Yes.
County of Marin,
Yes.
City of Martinez, Town of Moraga, County of Napa and all 5 Napa cities, City of Novato, City of Oakley, City of Pinot,
Yes.
City of Pittsburgh, City of Richmond,
Yes.
Town of Ross,
Yes.
Town of San Anselmo,
Yes.
City of San Pablo,
Yes.
City of San Rafael,
Yes.
City of San Ramon,
Yes.
City of Sausalito and the City of Mill Valley, County of Solano, Town of Tiburon,
Yes.
City of Walnut Creek.
All righty. Good, great. All right, we're going to move on to a related topic of the reserve policy. All right.
Yes. Thank you, Director Sears. So the next one we'd like to talk about is the reserve policy because, as I mentioned just a bit ago, based upon our budget amendment and projections that we anticipate realizing and hitting our existing reserve fund targets. So in February of 2016, the board approved policy 013, the reserve policy, and then in May of 2018, the board approved amendments to this policy, simplifying the calculations and to extend the target date to meet the reserve goals to the end of this fiscal year, March 31st, 2020. So reserves enable MCE to satisfy working capital requirements, procure energy at competitive rates, adhere to loan or debt covenants, and to cover unanticipated expenditures, support rate stability, and have been cited by both Moody's and Fitch as one of MCE's primary credit strengths. So as a result of the rate increase enacted this year and slightly better operating performance, we anticipate reaching the financial goals of the current reserve policy by the end of the targeted date of March 31st, 2020. So staff reviews the reserve policy annually and proposes changes as needed. Changes at this time include the following: increasing the reserve target from 40% to 60% of annual expense budget, increasing the liquidity target from 140 days to 240 days cash on hand, directing the reserve levels to be for the current fiscal year as opposed to the ensuing fiscal year, and finally, extending the target date to achieving MCE's new proposed revenue and liquidity targets from March 31st, 2020 to 2 years later of March 31st, 2022. So 2 additional years to meet the new higher targets. So given the suggested updates to the reserve target would be calculated as 60% of the energy and operating costs for the then current fiscal year. So for instance, again, there's a lot of numbers up on this page. So in 2020-21, 60% of the target would be, reserve target would be $235 million. Okay, so as you can see, projected right now, we currently expect to be slightly above the current reserve target, both in terms of the 40% goal, but also from a liquidity standpoint, our goal is 140 days, and in conjunction with what we hope to have approved today, which is an increase in our credit line from $25 million to $40 million, we anticipate at the end of this fiscal year being at 158 days of liquidity. Okay, so the liquidity goals are just as important as the reserve goals, because this is really what, for example, the rating agencies look at when they look at us in terms of our ability to withstand, a sudden expense or reduced revenues for some reason. So this notion of liquidity or days cash on hand is an established metric used by the industry participants in the rating agencies. So the current target of 140 days is associated with organizations that have investment grade ratings, like MCE does, but more in the lower end of that range of investment grade, which is such as Baa2 BBB, which is our current ratings. So staff proposes increasing the liquidity target to 240 days cash on hand by the end of fiscal year 2022. These proposed liquidity levels are commensurate with a financially strong utility, capable of withstanding prolonged rate competition, and one that has the ability to potentially invest some of its cash or to acquire capital assets, and also to be in line with utilities that have stronger A ratings. So the fiscal impacts are the proposed policy that has an indirect fiscal impact by providing a policy framework for rate setting and for maintaining reserves as part of your annual budget process. The recommendation would be to, and the executive committee did support this, it was to approve the proposed amendments to the reserve policy, 013, the reserve policy of MCE.
Super. Thank you, Garth. I think it's great that we're even having this conversation, frankly. Barbara?
Yeah, I'm particularly thrilled at this. I love big reserves, and I know a former member, Sashi McEntee, would have been thrilled to see this. I just wanted to point out one thing because somehow my eyes catch things. But in the policy 013, instead of 60%, it's a 64%. So it looked like when you were redlining, you missed changing it from 40 to 60, so it says 64.
Or 640.
It's a cross out. It's a cross
Yeah,
out.
exactly.
That's- yeah.
Director Coley, what happened was
So I can't see
in
it
the
on
red
my
line,
iPad?
no, it's the red line is the cross through the 4. It just looks like
Yeah.
it's a 4. So it is supposed to be 60%.
Okay.
If we accepted changes, it would say 60.
Yeah. So those
Okay.
vagaries of redlining.
Yes, that's
All
exactly
right.
right. Yes.
Well, thank you for that.
Yeah.
No question.
All right.
Okay.
Other questions or comments from the board? Seeing and hearing none.
To approve the proposed amendments to MCE Policy 013, Reserve Policy, and the making sure that we are reading that as 60%.
Thank you. Was there anyone from the public who wanted to comment? All right. I have a motion. Do I have a second? All
Barbara
right.
Kohler.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposition? That's approved. All right, continuing on, we are now going to discuss revolving a credit agreement with J.P. Morgan Chase. This is really, you're going to talk about it, Vicken?
Yeah.
You're giving Garth a break.
Yeah,
Okay,
sure.
All right.
Well, I just want to take a little bit, just maybe half a minute, and say that this is a really, really important day or night for MCE to look at all these financial maturity steps that we're bringing forth. And our next step is to bring to you what it's going to take to have bonding authority. That's next, as we may choose to maybe own something or two. So, I just want to really recognize Maida that saved me quite a bit on this matter, and specifically Jim Tracy, that's been our consultant on this matter. So our letter of credit with River City Bank was supposed to expire pretty soon. We wanted to increase that significantly to complement everything else you are approving or have approved tonight, right? To strengthen us and take us to the next steps, and importantly, to be able to take the blows if there are any coming our way. So we're migrating from 25 million of credit to 40 million. It's a 3-year agreement. We went through a public process to work with several entities. We chose J.P. Morgan Chase Bank. The overall term and the lowest cost, based on all the variables, were the best one that we could work with. Hopefully, it will enhance our investment grade credit rating. And last but not least, J.P. Morgan Chase Bank has the ability to increase the amount of line of credit facility if we need to. We can, Maida and Jim can go into significant more details if you would like to. Okay. We took this information to XCOM, and there was significant support. Well, it was supported.
Super. Fantastic. All right. Comments from the board? Questions? Comments? Everybody's getting tired. Yeah. Rupert, please.
Quick question. I'm assuming that we can afford the additional commitment fees that are going to go along with this?
Yes.
I'm getting the feeling that with my city hat on, I'm in the wrong business. You know, we struggle to have 10% reserves, and our credit rating is not great. And it's nice to be part of an organization with 60.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Tom, that's really music to our ears, right? It's really great for an entity that is 10 years old, that doubled its size about a year ago, with all these uncertainties that are just one after the other coming, and you guys know more than I do, right? I really believe that financial strength, in addition to belief in what we're trying to do, can take us through. So I appreciate all the effort.
There you go.
Was there someone in Concord who wanted to make a comment? Okay. No,
So-
I think, yes.
No,
Kevin?
I mean, subject to additional comments from the public, I'd be happy to make the
Super.
motion to
I mean,
approve the
absolutely
resolution.
appreciate it. But this is a moment to celebrate. It truly is. No, it is. It's great. Anyone from the public want to comment? Okay, seeing none.
I'll second.
All right, motion is second. All in favor?
Yes.
Aye. Any opposition?
That would be Ford Green.
And Director Sears, I apologize in advance, but we do have to do another roll call vote because it's a resolution.
Oh, trying to get away with it, and you never let me. Okay. All right.
City of Belvedere,
Yes.
City of Benicia,
Yes.
City of Concord, County of Contra Costa, Town of Corte Madera,
Yes.
Town of Danville, City of El Cerrito,
Yes.
Town of Fairfax,
Yes.
City of Lafayette,
Yes.
City of Larkspur,
Yes.
County of Marin,
Yes.
City of Martinez, Town of Moraga,
Yes.
City of Napa and all 5 Napa cities, City of Novato, City of Oakley,
Yes.
City of Pinole,
Yes.
City of Pittsburgh, City of Richmond,
Yes.
Town of Ross,
Yes.
Town of San Anselmo,
Yes.
City of San Pablo,
Yes.
City of San Rafael,
Yes.
City of San Ramon,
Yes.
City of Sausalito and the City of Mill Valley, County of Solano, Town of Tiburon,
Yes.
City of Walnut Creek.
I will be abstaining. My wife works for JP Morgan.
Uh-oh. All right. Oop. Are we good?
Roll call complete.
All righty. Thanks very much. So the next item on our agenda is new board member additions to committees. I'm never sure this is a good conversation to have after being in a meeting for 2.5 hours, but I think we do want to talk about whether folks want to join some of our committees. John, did you want to talk about this one?
Yeah, I'd love to say just a couple of words. We have an interested director in joining our executive committee, as noted in your packet. Director Patterson has offered to join executive committee, which is fantastic. Also, Director Green has offered to rejoin actually technical committee where he served before. So that's great news. And then in addition, we would like to form a 2020 ad hoc contracts committee. This is because we are going to be running an open season again for some power supply in 2020. And we have a couple of other regulatory related procurement issues that are going to be coming up early in the year. So we have not yet announced this committee, so I don't yet have any volunteers. So that one's wide open. And the only thing we need to watch out for is we can't have any committee get bigger than a quorum of our board, obviously. And we do have to be careful in some cases. We can't get a quorum of any committee on our ad hoc contracts committee. So if we have a lot of volunteers that are already on committees, we'll just need to make sure we don't have any overlap there. So with that, I'd love to take any volunteers for any committee that you see here.
Are you asking for volunteers for the contract committee at this time?
Maybe that would be a good, maybe I should be more specific. Let's start with that. Let's start with any volunteers for the ad hoc contracts committee. Great, Director Perkins. Does anyone else, maybe I should say a couple of words about this committee. It will probably, it will not be a standing committee that meets on a regular monthly basis, but we will probably have a meeting at some time in January, and then also likely have another meeting or two in the March through June timeframe as we look at bids that come in during our open season. Those bids are due on March 1, so we tend to compile those and go to the committee to help us do the short list selection. And then later in the summer, we may have one additional meeting or two, depending on how the negotiations are going on contracts. This ad hoc contracts committee will ultimately report out to the technical committee with a recommendation on approval of power supply contracts. These will primarily be what we call bucket 1 transactions or power content label 1 transactions, which are renewable contracts, typically of a long-term nature, 10 years or more, typically within the state, and they may be for solar, wind, geothermal, biomass, and we may be including some facilities with battery storage this time around. So that, if you couldn't tell, that was an advertisement. Yeah.
I'll join.
All right, we've got Director Anderson joining. Thank you.
This is Director Lyman. As a former person who's served on this, I'll back you up, Dawn. This is probably one of the most exciting ones to be on because you get behind the curtain opportunity to see some of the things we're doing. You actually get to set the direction and influence about what of the power we're buying. So this is a pretty influential group, and I will not be available to serve on it going for this next year.
Shucks. Kevin?
Don, it's Kevin Harroff from City of Larkspur. I'd be happy to participate. I've been on this committee in the past and agree with everything Greg just said about the value of the committee and the exciting aspects of it. I also wanted to make just one point of clarification. I think on the list that we have for the audit committee for 2019, I think technically I was on that. I just want to make sure that I have expressed my interest to continue to be on that for 2020.
Thank you for clarifying that, Director Harroff. We'll make sure and look into that. And thanks for volunteering to be on this committee. Is there any other volunteers?
For another committee?
John, did you want to?
I may be interested in the technical committee because of the work I do at the Air Resources Board.
Don't listen to what Dawn said on that
okay.
infomercial previously. Really, it's TechCom that's the best.
Yeah. I notice it meets the first Thursday of the month, right? Is that when you meet normally? Right.
Early in the morning.
That's correct. It's at 8:30.
I may miss some because I have occasionally Air District meetings in San Francisco at 9:30, so I may not make them all, but may be interested in that. So is there room on that?
Yes, there can be room on that.
Because this your maximum 8.
Yeah, I noticed that as well. I think that we need to adjust the language to not say maximum. It's the current number of committee members that are listed. As long as we don't exceed a quorum of the board, we should be fine. So there's not a limitation there.
Great.
Okay.
Super. Terrific. Anyone else? Okay.
I'd like to join the contract committee.
Oh, great. We have another volunteer, Director Salimi from Pinole on the ad hoc contracts committee. Great. Thank you very much. Okay.
Perfect.
Okay. Would anyone else like to join the ad hoc contracts technical committee or executive committee? Okay, so I'll just read what I have here, and we could do this all in one motion to keep things moving. We have Director Patterson interested in joining the executive committee, Director Green and Joya joining the technical committee, and then we'll be creating an ad hoc contracts committee with Director Perkins, Anderson, Haroff, and Salimi. Any additions?
Terrific.
Oh, we're not doing that tonight.
All of the ad hocs can be done by phone.
Is technical ad hoc or no?
No, technical standing.
Got
And
it,
right
okay.
now, El Cerrito has been doing the the technical at City Hall starting at 8:30. We do get members of the public there that testify.
So it meets in El Cerrito.
It meets in El
Your
Cerrito.
home. There we go. Close to me. That's
and
great.
it's effectively done by phone, although we can see the
okay.
projection.
Oh, so you're
because it's
saying
posted.
You're saying on any of these committees, if you're not there in person, you can call in as well.
As long as it's posted so the public can join you.
Posted
okay.
for
Got it.
the posted for
Location.
TechCom. The
Posted
ad
for
hocs can be done by phone.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
And you have to post it on the door of your office, too. So.
Yeah. Okay. Are we good? All right. So we need someone to make a motion for the addition to the committees that Don just read off.
Barbara Kohler, Fairfax, I'll make that
And I'll second it, Fort Greene, Santa Soma.
All in favor? Aye.
Yes.
Aye.
Terrific. All right, hang in there, everybody. We only have 2 more items. The next one is the low-income families and tenants application to the CPUC.
Yes, hello. I'm here to talk about an application that we filed in early November with the CPUC, and this is to extend our income-qualified multifamily energy efficiency program for years 2021 through 2026. Just to provide a little bit of background on the ESA programs, that's the Energy Savings Assistance Program. It's funded through the CPUC to provide energy efficiency programs for income qualified customers. It's been around for quite a long time, since the 90s. Typically, the programs are administered by the IOUs, but since 2017, MCE has run a pilot program under that proceeding. And actually, you can click through to the next slide. I'm going to try to move quickly through the slides, but please let me know if you'd like me to revisit anything. So the program that we filed an application for is a comprehensive energy savings program. So that includes technical assistance. We go out, we do an audit. We provide assistance with bidding out the work and managing the projects. We provide rebates for the equipment installed. There's a tenant education component and a workforce development component. I wanted to provide a little bit of background on what we have accomplished to date with our pilot program. So we're just entering our 3rd year of that pilot program. To date, we've had 926 units at 22 properties participate, meaning that they've received the incentive and they've received the audit and we're working with them to finish projects. And we've had 89 units receive installations or finish projects at 6 properties. There's an electrification component of this pilot. So we've had we've proposed heat pumps in 97 units and had 57 of those complete installation. We're doing surveys with tenants to make sure that they're satisfied with the work that we're doing and that there aren't any problems with that. And we've had really good rates of satisfaction. 82% of the tenants surveyed were happy with the work that we're doing. And in particular, 90% of the tenants were satisfied with the heat pump technology that we installed. A few lessons that...
What are we doing about the other 18%?
That's a good question. I think those are actually pretty high rates for satisfaction. When you think about like what a tenant might think about an energy efficiency upgrade in their unit, most of the people who didn't rank highly satisfied didn't really have an opinion about the upgrades in their unit. So we haven't, through these surveys, we haven't identified any major issues with the work that we're doing. But if they do come up, then we would address those. But I'd also be happy to provide you with what the breakdown is of the non-highly satisfied customers to see how many are neutral and how many were dissatisfied. So some of the lessons that we've learned to date, there's a benefit in providing a flexible measure list to allow the property owners to pick the measures that they are installing. We're seeing a lot of efficiency in stacking programs, so running this program in conjunction with our standard energy efficiency program, as well as in conjunction with the GHHI, the Green and Healthy Homes Initiative program, and also layering in other programs that provide services to multifamily housing. And then also the importance of promoting the health, comfort, and safety benefits alongside the energy efficiency work. A lot of our participating properties are drawn to the energy efficiency because of some of these other benefits. So I'm going to breeze through these lessons learned pretty quickly, just in the interest of time. So actually, we can go to the next slide. There's 6 cornerstones of our program proposal. The first one is that we've proposed to adjust the income eligibility threshold to 60% of area median income as opposed to 200% federal poverty level, which it is at right now. And just for a brief comparison, the 200% federal poverty level can be as low as 30% area median income. So because the cost of living within our service area is so high, we see that there's a need and there's a gap between the 60% AMI and the 200% federal poverty level that we would like to be able to serve through this program. So we've asked to adjust that threshold. We'll continue layering this program with our energy efficiency programs. We get administrative efficiency out of that. And then we're exploring ways to treat naturally occurring affordable housing. And so by that, I mean not deed-restricted properties, but properties where we find where the residents qualify for low-income programs, even if they're not specifically living in dedicated low-income housing. We will be working with local governments as trusted messengers to target the outreach on the program. And we've developed a target list of measures. So we want to focus on those health, safety, and comfort measures. We'll continue to include electrification and heat pumps. And then this is a new measure for this upcoming cycle. We want to include demand response technology. And that's important because of the upcoming transition to time of use rates. We want to make sure that low-income customers are not adversely affected or left behind in that transition. And then lastly, we're maintaining the choice in contractor and equipment. This is actually an issue that we identified with the IOU low-income programs, is that they pre-select the exact equipment type, and sometimes that's not the best match or it's not the highest quality equipment. So we want to let the property manager select that equipment so that we know that it's something that's going to work for them. Yeah, I think I just sort of talked through this. So again, for program coordination, this is a little bit more information about some of the programs that we would layer in and coordinate with. Down on the bottom, we have the solar on multifamily affordable housing, DAC Community Solar, which is kind of like our local SOL program, but for low-income customers who could receive a discount for signing up for that service. Self-generation incentive program can help provide energy storage, and then our own electric vehicle program. Just a little bit of background on how we came up with our targets for the program, which I'll talk about next. We found a few different sources for the numbers of affordable housing by county in our service area. And they're all a little bit different because the definition of affordable housing is a little bit different by each of these. But we sort of triangulated between the 3 of them to make sure that our estimates are reasonable.
With that slide up there, can I ask a question about that? So
Sure.
Benicia has a housing authority, and we have several properties with affordable housing. And so one property does not quite make it?
Oh, so you mean there's more than
Right, we have,
what is up here?
let me see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Okay, I will reach out to you after this to get more information about those. That would be great. So these are annual energy savings targets. Actually, the table 3 down below shows our unit participation targets. We built in a ramp-up period. There's always a certain amount of time to get those properties in the pipeline and do the assessments before we hit sort of a higher rate of completion. So over the 6 years, we would target 4,400 units having work done through the property. And then the savings targets are based on what we have been able to achieve in the past and then looking at our unit targets. This is our 6-year budget for the program. So We're asking for $10 million over 6 years to run the program, and a little more than $6.5 million would be dedicated towards incentives. I wanted to talk a little bit about how we would target outreach and seek out, especially those naturally occurring affordable housing properties that might be harder to reach. This is a map that we compiled as part of our pilot that we're doing right now, and this combines our own data on who is on a care rate, who may be behind on payments, combined with other publicly available data and census data, such as food stamp recipients and the median cost of housing. And it allows us to look at a census tract basis. The darker the color here, the more likely there is to be naturally occurring affordable housing in that census tract. So we would use this to target our outreach. And then lastly, this map is just our service area, but what I want to say is that while we will be specifically targeting the program, we're not limiting participation. Any property that qualifies based on the income eligibility requirements would be eligible to participate in the program. Next steps, we submitted our application November 1st. We'll be presenting to the CPUC's Low Income Oversight Board on December 10th, and then we'll be moving through the probably slow process of getting a program approved for the CPUC, but ideally with a start date of the beginning of the year 2021. And happy to take any questions.
Greg, did you have a question?
Yeah, are you worried that naturally occurring affordable homes will take advantage of this program and then sell and basically capitalize into their wallet the work we've done?
That is a concern, and what we are proposing to pilot through this program are ideas that were suggested through another proceeding at the CPUC that's doing work in the San Joaquin Valley, also looking at naturally occurring affordable housing. So some of the things that we would like to pilot are one, having a clawback provision that says that that they will keep rents at a certain rate, for a set length of time. We'll be asking them to self-report their rent rates back to us, and we'll track that over the life of the program. And then we're going to specifically look at that issue, and if we see issues with that coming up, that'll be a specific initiative that we'll look at and explore other ways to deal with that issue through the life of the program.
Great, thank you.
Super. Any other questions for Alice?
I just want to add one
Dickon.
thing. One of the biggest challenges have been to find eligible customers, eligible low-income folks to help them. And we're taking on a big challenge by doubling the area median income in our application. We're not sure how that's going to go, but that's going to be one of the major drivers to actually increase our product delivery in our area.
Right. Absolutely. Terrific. Super. Great program. Really good update. Any other questions or comments? We're going to move on, I think, to the last but not least item on our agenda, which is an overview of the California Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Program. Brett, are you still there and awake?
Brett is with us. He's making his way over to the microphone.
Excellent.
And I think we've saved the best two items for last here. It's really great. To, a lot of the items tonight have been internal, and it's really neat to really see the impact we're having out in the community. So big thanks to Alice and Brett for all the efforts.
Yeah, thanks, Don. Yeah, so as Chair Sears said, this is the California Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Program. This is a program run by the CEC, and wanted to just sort of go over this program, the EV market a little bit. You've probably heard me give a market primer before, but always good reminder as the numbers are changing. Talk a little bit more about the details of the program, including other CCA participation in the program, and then what are our options in this program for MCE and our member communities. So at a high level, the Cali VIP is a CEC program that addresses the regional needs for EV charging infrastructure to meet the state's 2025 goals. And this program provides about $30 million per year to counties across California to do that in grants and matching grants, while also creating a community of practitioners to learn from each other, people that are doing this work on a daily basis, continuing to learn best practices over the multi-year program. So for the market primer, just wanted to show you this sort of thermometer by Veloz, which is an EV and trade and marketing group in California. This is tracking towards 2030 because when Governor Brown was in office, he set a goal. One of his last sort of acts was set a goal of getting 5 million EVs in the road in California by 2030. But earlier in his term, he had set a goal of 1.5 million EVs by 2025. So the Cal EVIP program tracks towards that 2025 goal. I thought it'd be helpful for those that aren't really familiar with EV charging infrastructure to give you a sense of the different types. This is important because the program focuses on 2 of these 3 types. So level 1 charging essentially is plugging your car in your standard 110 volt outlet. A lot of people think they need some fancy technology to use an electric vehicle. That's not the case. You can get about 3 to 5 miles per hour of charge by just plugging into your standard 110 volt outlet, which is really sufficient for most people's daily commuting if you can do that at your home. Level 2 charging is a little more advanced. It requires a 220 volt outlet. Typically, there are higher installation and infrastructure costs to do that. But this is the use case for this is typically at workplaces, multifamily properties, retail spaces, and surface parking. And I should note surface parking, the city of Concord just completed 2 EV charging projects under our MCE EV charging program in their parking garages in downtown Concord. So thanks for the city for doing that. Yeah, those are good use cases because cars will typically be there, not in a rush, and they can really, if you came to work with very little charge, you could fully charge your battery by just plugging in, like you can do it at our San Rafael office. DC fast charging is what you might think about with Tesla or Electrify America or EVgo. These are very high cost and complex systems. They have costs of over $100,000 per unit and even more if you look at the infrastructure upgrades. But this is what people really want to get to when they think about having electric vehicles for the masses, when people can charge a vehicle up to 80% battery within 20 to 30 minutes. So anyway, just give you a little bit of a background on the technical nature of charging. So in the market, this is a survey done by NREL, and these are the barriers for EV adoption. And so MCE's transportation electrification programs are focused on reducing the top 3 market barriers to EV adoption. Our EV charging programs address these 2 barriers. People's inability to charge away from home represents, for consumers, about 48% of consumers are not buying an EV because they don't have charging away from home. 30% consumers are not getting an EV because they cannot charge at home. And the at home is really important because there are a lot of renters out there, even in single family properties, myself included, that we cannot install charging at the property because it's not under, as a tenant, you're not allowed to make those kinds of upgrades, nor would you want to make the capital improvements and just have them sit from when you leave the property. Multifamily is the biggest proportion of reasons why that 30% exists, and it's a big nut to crack, and one thing that this program can address. So access to EV charging, this is board participation. So when we're thinking about EV charging, we think about a few things. Ports, sort of the units that you plug in. Stations, the station typically holds 1 or 2 ports. But right now we just want to talk about location. So a location would be like MCE's San Rafael office would be 1 location. So show of hands, there will be 3 options, show of hands. How many of you would say that in Marin County, there are option 1, more gas stations than public locations of EV charging. Show of hands. Hard to see in San Rafael right now, but okay. Number 2, you think they're similar. Gas stations and EV charging public locations are similar. Okay. Number 3, there are more public locations for EV charging than gas stations. Okay, well, you might have caught on, but we should break some myths for people. Most people, I just mentioned the barriers. People feel like they are unable to charge away from home. That's a top barrier. Some of that is true. There are gaps in our service area and across California where there's not EV charging, but some of that is just perception. And so I think as a CCA, we need to break that perception. So there are areas where there are definitely more gas stations than EV charging locations, but Napa County and Marin County, there are more public EV charging locations than gas stations. And there are significant gaps in Solano County and Contra Costa County. But these are myths that we have to break and perceptions that we have to break as representatives of the public.
Like in all real estate, location sometimes plays a factor.
Can you get your mic on?
Oh, okay.
That's a good comment.
Okay. So while locations do matter, electric vehicles do not have the same fueling experience as gas. And so this is why we need many more ports, the actual plugs, for EVs than we do number of pumps for gas. And so this chart shows you the significant gaps we have across our service area. And this is very typical of the rest of California, as we'll talk about in a second. And you can see this most significant gaps across our service area are in our highest population counties, Contra Costa County and Marin County, specifically when we're looking at level 2 charging and DC fast charging. And this map is developed through the EVI Pro tool, which is really important because this is the gaps in a county using this tool is the most significant factor or variable in the CEC granting funds to an institution under the Cal EVIP program. So what is the program? So like I mentioned, it's about $30 million per year. So in program year 2021, $30 million. For that cycle, they're going to accept 3 to 4 proposals. Proposals could be multi-county, but essentially think about they're looking to fund 3 to 4 institutions. These proposals are non-competitive. This is not a traditional public solicitation. The CEC handholds applicants along the process. The requirement to even move forward in the process is a very simple 2-page letter of intent or LOI that they have a template for you. So they really want to encourage participation in this, and the CEC has developed this program to try to get over the hurdles and bureaucracy of some of their other programs. As I mentioned, the largest variable in selection of a proposal is a county's infrastructure gap using the EVI Pro tool. Other considerations would be the partnerships and fund matching. The CEC only has $30 million a year, and they're trying to fund 3 to 4 proposals. They want to stretch those dollars and have matching funds do that. Another consideration is AB 1236 compliance, which we did talk about, and I kind of previewed at the board retreat to tee up this conversation so that it wasn't a new conversation. So the timeline, November 2019, partners identified. We're checking that box and have a lot of partners that I'll talk about in a second already identified and ready to support. February 14th is when that LOI, a letter of intent, is due with all partner signatures and funding commitments laid out. March 2020 is when project customizations are due. The program is largely set, but on a county-by-county basis, you might be able to change the types of funding for certain projects. Maybe you have an adder for a rural community that maybe the private sector isn't really going to put a lot of money in because they don't see high utilization. We can maybe increase funds for those projects so they happen much more quickly. May 2020 is when the scope of work, budget, and contracts are finalized. And by June 2020, the CEC selects projects to start in 2021. August 2020 is when they announce the projects, and there's public workshops and comment periods across the areas that the project would serve. And December 2020 is when the project would launch, likely starting service, taking in projects in January of 2021. So we're teeing this up 13 months before anything would actually happen on the ground. But there are a lot of intermediary steps that we have to hit so that we're even in a position to get awarded these funds. So the rest of this conversation is really about how can we put MCE in a position, and all of our member communities in a position to bring these funds in and get a proposal accepted by the CEC for the 2021 cycle. Program benefits, I already mentioned the matching funds. It's at least on a one-to-one match. The incentives cover a wide range of customer costs. So it covers the hardware, the installation. They provide technical assistance. They can even cover electrical upgrades that some other programs just can't cover. They allow funds to be bucketed. This is really important across a multi-county project. So let's say, especially across our service area, Marin County, Contra Costa County have the most significant gaps. If we're looking to get partnership funding, for example, with Contra Costa County, of which a couple institutions there have already at least verbally committed, they could put some funds in. Contra Costa County would, with our matching funds, we could silo those funds for Contra Costa County. If a county's putting funds up, they're probably not going to want those funds to go into another county. Another way we're able to do this is any funds that MCE would put on the table, we can bucket those for only MCE customers. The match funding provided by the CEC has to go to any person or customer or resident in that jurisdiction, even if MCE does not serve them. But the funds that MCE puts in, we can bucket that only to go to our customers. There's a designated implementer right now under our MCEV charging program. You're looking at the implementer right here. It is a lot of work, and it would be a great it would be great support to have outside support to manage this program, especially if you're looking at the scale that we're going to talk about in a second. It's also a very customer-friendly user experience. All customers, no matter if they're bucketed for as an MC customer or they're in a specific county, all go through one portal. The complicated stuff is handled on the back end by the implementer, and it's a very easy process to go through. It also allows it to stack with other incentives, which is a really big barrier for any type of rebate program. Another really important thing is that up to 7% of the total funds allotted, including the match funds from partners, can be put towards marketing. This is really important so that we're reaching hard-to-reach customers, and I would say a lot of those customers just don't know about EV charging. I think municipalities, local governments really know about these programs, and I'm working with many of your local governments right now on projects, but think about multifamily properties, nonprofits, small businesses. They do not have the bandwidth to think about EV charging on a daily basis. And for multifamily properties, they only think about EV charging if a tenant gets an EV, which is very unlikely if there's no charging at that facility already. So this will be a great opportunity to reach those that really aren't thinking about EV charging right now. And just a comparison of the Cal EVIP program to MC EV charging.
To the end.
I think your head was just too far from the mic.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so a comparison, Cal EVIP, they provide funding for level 2 and DC fast charging for level 2 at a much higher rate than our MCEV charging program right now, which our program does not provide funding for DC fast charging. It is just such a high cost, our funds would dwindle very quickly. But they do, up to $55,000. Yeah, this is important. So to date, our MC customers are averaging on a cost per level 2 port around $5,700. So our program right now covers roughly 47% of total project costs on a per port basis. So if you increase that to about the $5,000 level, the customer still has some skin in the game, but we're covering much more of those project costs, which will get more of these projects in the ground. So how are other CCAs participating in this program? We currently have 5 other CCAs that have received funding or have had proposals approved and will receive funding in 2020. You can kind of read down the list. I would say in general, at least how the 2021 program cycle was talked about at the CEC's workshop at the end of October. You'll see on this list that some of these CCAs are more in, they're leveraging their dollars maybe 3 times, while other CCAs on here are more 1-to-1. And given the amount of funds they have and the amount of proposals they're looking to accept, I would assess they're looking at more of a 1-to-1 match. But you can see there's a lot of participation by a lot of other CCAs already. And I want to talk about AB 1236 compliance because it is one of the factors. And we talked about it at the board retreat. This map looks a lot more red than it was at the board retreat because there's more information plugged in. And I wanted to give a shout out to Moraga, San Pablo, County of Marin, Benicia, and Walnut Creek. Those 5 member communities have already filled out this AB 1236 survey that was sent out after the board retreat, which means a lot of other member communities could fill out that survey and would really help us help you meet AB 1236 compliance. For example, after the County of Marin filled out the survey, we were able to work with the governor's office to make sure that the governor's office knew that the County of Marin was taking up passing an ordinance in their MCEP committee. So that's going to allow that big red splotch in Marin to go yellow pretty soon. And they're also working on EV reach code, something that the governor's office didn't know. So some of this is us playing a facilitator role, and we really want to work with you. So you probably got that email from Darlene. If you could open that back up, that would be great. And if you could fill out that survey.
We can also resend that to you all so that it's at the top of your inbox. And if you'd like us to forward it to a city manager or another staff member, just let us know.
Just for clarification, because after the retreat, I did ask for whether we had implemented or adopted the ordinance, and I got assurances after a couple of emails. So what does implemented mean?
Yeah, so implemented, so you passed an ordinance but not implemented. So there are a lot of other steps to implementation other than passing an ordinance. You have to have, for example, you have to have a checklist for the permitting office to go through with a potential project site. You also have to have electronic submission of those permits. So those are just 2 examples of things that need to be implemented after an ordinance is passed. I think the state does, yes. So just talked about AB 1236 compliance. That's 25% of how proposals are accepted. Partnerships and commitments are the other 25% outside of the 50% of the EVI Pro tool. And as you can see, I've already done a lot of work on developing partnerships. The major partnerships are at a county or regional level. So I've tapped into all of the transit authorities and county government staff. We have a meeting that's going to be scheduled with Solano County, so that's the one exception there. But everyone so far has given support for signing on to the letter of intent. And we actually have a few agencies that have given verbal commitment for funding. And as I said, this is really important so we can meet that match. So I wanted to bring this chart up again because this is going to be the basis for understanding the next few slides what kind of level of funding it will actually take to get our proposal to be competitive. And the gap in EV infrastructure will be dictated by the funding levels required to fill in that gap. So the CEC has this kind of weird calculation of what they feel like the gap should be met by the public sector and what the match fund should be. So I'm going to kind of take you through their logic. So the first step is to fully fund the level 2 gap and the DC fast charging gap, these are the numbers they provide. But they believe that actually the private sector should fund about 50% of level 2 charging and about 70% of DC fast charging. So then they whittle that down. And they say that, for example, in Contra Costa County, to meet what they believe the public sector commitment should be, it's roughly $11.5 million. And you can read the other ones, I won't go through them. So what that means is that from an expected match for all of these sites, if we're looking at a match as a 1-to-1, across all 4 of our counties, the total expected match would be about $10.9 million. Yeah, and partners in this includes lead agencies, in which case in this proposal that would also include MCE.
Can I ask on this chart, are you identifying
go ahead.
total dollar, this is John Joya from Contra Costa, total dollar amount for what you're estimating is the total gap in the needed number of level 2 and DC fast chargers in those jurisdictions?
Not in this chart, but in this chart right here, this is what the CEC projects as the total dollars needed to fill in the gap in EV charging that's projected to be needed by 2025.
For public chargers.
Correct, public.
Public chargers.
So how are you incorporating
Publicly available.
How are you incorporating the fact that there's a lot of other funding available for chargers, like the Electrify America program? So it's not like we need to close the gap with our efforts, because there's a lot of free money coming in, like, again, the Electrify America, there's some PG&E. So how are you anticipating that?
Well, so I am not. The CEC is. And so in this next graph, this is where I'm showing.
But they can't, because Electrify America hasn't finalized their plan. I mean, is CEC estimating how much funding will come from Electrify America?
I think so Electrify America is a private entity, even though they're part of a public settlement. And so I think they include that in what they view as the private sector making up that 70% in DC fast charging.
But let me ask, because I'm on the Air Resources Board that did the settlement agreement with Electrify America, so I'm familiar with it. So that is there's a spending plan. The Air Resources Board approves their plan, and so it is private money, but there's public direction on how it's spent, and a lot of it's to go to also lower income communities. So what I'm trying to understand is, where does that piece fit in? It's because it's actually coming, it's directed through a public settlement with the state of California. So which category is that in?
I can't answer for what the CEC would include that in the category. My guess would be they would include that in what they would view as the private sector commitment, which would be the other 50% on level 2 funding and the 70% on DC fast charging.
Yeah, can we just get clarification on that? Because I mean, I'm just looking, I'm trying to figure how we shift as much as possible, right, as you say, to the private sector or to the Electrify America funding, which is going to be substantial, right? And and try to utilize our funding where that gap is not going to be filled. So maybe it's just a question of finding out from Electrify America what assumptions they're using. I mean, from CEC, what assumptions they're using on that, because it's a significant amount. It's a significant amount of money.
Yeah.
What about the PG&E? There's not as much there. Is that factored in as well?
I don't believe so. This is for going into moving forward. The PG&E program is no longer accepting projects, and as of right now, isn't being refunded. There's a docket hearing in December to discuss a refund of the public purpose funds for transportation electrification. But as of right now, there's no new projects. Yeah.
And the focus of all of this is public charging, but then you also mentioned multifamily, which I know there's one of the biggest gap is in multifamily in terms of residential. So would some of this funding get used for charging in multifamily developments?
And there are exceptions in many programs around public access and multifamily, given that's usually a non-starter.
Right, but so would the multifamily chargers have to be publicly available, or would they just be for the residents of that development?
Most of the projects developed to date, they are just for the residents, and they're a shared asset for all the tenants at that property. So they're not on a private unit basis, but they are available exclusively for the tenants at that property.
But I'm trying to understand, is the funding here, how this funding that we're looking at, would that be spent on non-public multifamily developments as well?
It could be, yes.
Yes.
Okay, so you can spend this funding for that.
Correct.
So, but the intention is not to spend it for a single family then?
Correct.
I'm just trying to get the categories of funding. So multifamily and public charging.
Correct.
Okay, not single family. Good, okay. Yeah, because there's no sense using this funding for single family.
Yep, definitely. Yep.
Right, okay.
Yep. Yeah, so the total expected match of all partners, if we're looking at this proposal being on a one-to-one basis, would be roughly $11 million. And I kind of wanted to bring this up here because there were definitely had questions internally about, well, why don't we pursue more of what let's say Sonoma Clean Power did, and they leveraged their dollars to get 3 times from the CEC, and we could do that. That is definitely a strategy to take. I do not believe that we will have a successful proposal if we do that, given that currently in the 2021 cycle, all counties across California are allowed to participate. And if we're being ranked across other jurisdictions, if you look at the total need for charging, the LA region has the highest need. After that, it's Alameda County. And I already know that East Bay Community Energy will be submitting a proposal. I also know that Clean Power Alliance will be submitting a proposal. So we're already going up against other CCAs that have either a larger footprint or they have a more targeted footprint and maybe more funding to put towards it. Yeah, and we're going across 4 counties in this proposal. So I think the strategy here is that we do a one-to-one match, so we get all of our jurisdictions included, and that if we're looking at the CEC's goal of having 3 to 4 proposals funded, they could put $10 million towards this proposal and still put $10 million towards 2 other proposals and meet their goals. So that's the thinking behind it. Next steps here would be submitting a letter of intent that covers MCE's entire service area for a 4-year period. 4-year period so that we can spend less money on an annual basis but still meet the match requirement. That means that MCE's non-binding commitment would be roughly $1.4 million per year, or $5.5 million total. Right now, the board for this fiscal year, last fiscal year, and the coming fiscal year has already verbally committed or previously committed $1.5 million towards transportation electrification. And it's really important here to note that the CEC understands that public agencies can't make multi-year commitments because their proposals are based on annual funding agreements. And so this would be a non-binding commitment in the letter of intent. The goal would be that other partners contribute $5.4 million. And so if we're looking at proportionally dedicating that across our service area, that would be Contra Costa doing a match of $2.8 million or $718,000 per year over 4 years. Marin County, $1.9 million or $475,000 per year over 4 years. Solano County, $500,000 or $125,000 per year over 4 years. And Napa County, $187,000 or $47,000 per year over 4 years. So just wanted to level set that. I've already been talking to the partners identified in the previous slide about those funding commitments. And the secondary option, which I think we should take in the proposal, would be having our match dollars go to Contra Costa County and Napa County, given that Contra Costa County is the largest gap in our service area, and if the CEC is squeezed on funding, for example, they perceive the gap in total need of funding for LA region is $90 million. So if LA region gets a high match, they're likely going to put a lot of their money towards that region because it's the top priority and variable in selection of proposals. So the goal would be that in a secondary proposal, we just let the CEC know we're open to alternatives and we can dictate those alternatives, and that we could still self-fund or put our own money towards the same offer, and the program could continue in Marin County and Solano counties. So that's the proposal. It's a pretty significant level of funding that we're going after, and when I presented this to Dawn and Vic, and they thought it would be really important for the board to hear about this, especially given the fact that there would be, although non-binding, a multi-year funding commitment. And happy to take questions and chat.
Greg?
Yeah, Brett, this is Greg Lyman, El Cerrito. I think John Joya's question earlier was how much of Electrify America money can go towards that 5.4 million that you're asking for.
Yep.
Yeah, so the match dollars cannot come from the private sector. Electrify America is not dictated to spend that money on a county by county basis. They could totally avoid spending any of that money across our 4 counties. They are not doing that. There are active projects going on. But moving forward, Electrify America is putting their funds towards projects in ways that we cannot control, and they would not want to commit.
Just a question. So who have you talked to at the counties on this funding commitment?
So for county staff, it's typically sustainability staff. And then at the transit authorities, they're sort of my counterparts who work on clean transportation.
Don't get me wrong, this is a good program. I'm just trying to understand who you talked to at Contra Costa to commit for funding. Because I'm unaware.
Yeah. So I would say, so the funding was a verbal commitment to look into the funding options. At Contra Costa County, that was Jody London, and then also working with Peter Engel at CCTA. Largely the goal.
I realize that.
Yeah, so Jody's our sustainability director, and so I'm just trying to understand, and I'm chair of our sustainability committee of our board, and I know we've talked a lot about this EV, planning, but I just want to be realistic on trying to understand where you're getting the funding from. Because I was going to ask whether you were getting funding from the Transportation Authority, because they did a countywide plan for all the cities in the county to identify the gaps on EV, where to put EV chargers. So have you talked to the Transportation Authority?
Yes, yeah. I sat on that planning and vision group, and yeah. So Peter Engel, I'm working very closely with him at CCTA. And to be clear,
we're committed to find funding, but I'm not sure I know where the funding is going to come from.
Yeah, and I'm Peter, Jody, and I are meeting early next week to talk about where funding could come from. The yes verbal commitments to funding wasn't a guarantee of funding. It's just that they believe there's funds out there that exist that could be already put in leverage towards this. So the goal with these conversations around funding is to find funding that already exists that's going towards this type of work and that could just be leveraged to get.
Yeah, Jody may be thinking of it. I think, because I've talked to her, I think she may be thinking of Electrify America funding.
Okay. Well, I think there's some details to straighten out, but everybody's starting to wiggle and want to go home.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. This is. I'm just concerned. There needs to be a lot of conversation about making sure we're clear on all of this.
Yep. All righty. Sure. I'm about to lose my entire room of board members here. So, are there any specific questions that are quick and short for Brett? That was a great presentation, Brett, and obviously we have a lot of follow-up conversations. But if there's no more questions, what I would like to hear from Dawn is what's the date of our next board meeting? Because we're all hoping it's not in December. That would make us feel much better, wouldn't it?
Well, given the length of this meeting and the hours that folks have given us tonight, I think we will be able to get by without a December board meeting.
Excellent.
Yeah. We tend to not release the date until we get a little closer, but at this point, I'd say that we're 99% sure we will not need that meeting unless something very unexpected happens.
I think that's going to make everybody feel a lot better right now.
Yeah, that's right. So we'll be
All right.
we'll be back in touch with once we can firmly cancel that meeting.
Okay, super. Any other board or staff matters? Hearing none, we're adjourned. Thank you so much, everyone, for staying late.